Good night. Good night.
Bye.
Welcome, everybody, to tonight's special Common Council meeting. Roll call, please.
Fire,
Here.
Facial,
Here.
Rosendish,
Here.
Barkander,
Here.
Wagner,
Here.
Witzel,
Here.
Fisher,
Here.
Spiros, Budke,
Here.
and Hendler.
Here.
Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, item C, public comment. At this time, the mayor will recognize members of the public who have indicated their desire to address the council. Upon recognition by the mayor, persons may address the council from the podium. First stating their name and address, the council may take action on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Anyone from the public wish to address the council? I will, just as a reminder, I'll make it in here tomorrow at the fairgrounds for those interested in testing for COVID. It is going to take place at the fairgrounds tomorrow from 11 to 7. So we're also expecting some fun thunderstorms, so plan accordingly, but that'll be tomorrow, June 2nd at the fairgrounds. Any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll close the public comments. We'll go to item D. Review council's May 26th decision to open Hefko Pool and discuss the timeline for the construction of the new aquatic center, presented by Justin Casperson, Parks and Rec Director.
Good evening and thank you. I am going to try to share this. It's a short PowerPoint, but it kind of keeps us all on the same page. All right, everyone. I also gave you a hard copy at your desk, so it's a little easier for you to read. If you're like me, it's not easy to see those small screens. This was brought up to be brought back for consideration, I believe, by Alderman Witzel. I believe at the CIP meeting or maybe even a last council meeting, I don't recall, but I was told to get some information together for this meeting for you all to have a discussion, and that's what we're going to go through in the next couple minutes. So essentially, the question is whether we want to open Hefko Pool for the summer or not open Hefko Pool for the summer. I think the biggest deciding factor might be a financial decision. And we have a projected budget in front of you. We are anticipating additional costs for staff, and that's employees who will do what you normally wouldn't do in a normal year, which would be sanitation efforts and monitoring capacity, as well as the wading pool. And obviously, when you have that much sanitation efforts and things of that nature, you have additional supplies. So we'll have to buy additional supplies like rescue tubes. We need a bag valve mask, cleaning products, paper products, things of that nature. So that does add to the budget. So you have a table in front of you. It kind of explains the revenue expenses in a total. The first column is a 2020 budget. That's what we have budgeted for this year. We have a budgeted revenue of $35,000. We have a budgeted expense of $112,000. I just rounded these numbers. There's some extra dollars, but they're easy numbers to understand. And then this year we have a tax support of $77,000. The 2020 COVID is if we operate this year with the pandemic, we're anticipating a 50% loss in revenue. We have not sold any season passes. We're reluctant to sell any season passes because then if the county health or the state shuts us down, we'll have to figure out some sort of refund policy. And right now we don't really know what a season pass looks like. We have a pretty good idea what it'll look like, but most people I think will be more inclined to do a daily pass. So right now it's a 50% decline in revenue for the year. The expense did go up. It's based on a number of things. Number one, we're not operating at full capacity. We were originally scheduled to open on June 6th. This year we'll be opening on June 20th, so you got to factor that into our number, as well as the additional costs that are noted above, and that's how you get to the $120,000. The projected tax support on that would be $102,500. If we were to close today, just today, immediately, we would have fixed expenses, which full-time salaries, electric, water, some supplies that are already taken into account that we've already been doing down there. And that number would be 33,000. Obviously, if we close today, we wouldn't have any revenue generation. So that tax support would be 33,000. If you do the difference between the two, whether you operate this year under COVID conditions or you close, the difference is 69,500. So that's the financial component. I'm not quite sure how the council or the body wants to proceed, if we want to talk about this separately, or we want to try to marry the new outdoor aquatic center. I'll kind of defer to the body, the mayor or the...
What, Mr. Witzel?
Thank you. Since I did ask to have this brought in as a special meeting, I do want to mention that we had a little discussion about the openness of this body to discuss this topic as we were discussing the reopening of city buildings and services. And there seemed to be an appetite by the members of this body to go ahead and discuss this. However, I realized at the end of that meeting, common council meeting, that when I asked to have it on a future agenda, it would be 2 weeks out, and it seemed like 2 weeks would be further down the path if we had decided if we do decide we want to reverse course and not open. So thank you for the timeliness of this. I think both topics, both discussions kind of go hand in hand. There is the expenses that we're looking at, and I believe that you haven't even touched on some of the additional expenses. I don't know if you want to touch on some of those things. If I understand things correctly, and again, I'm trying to stick with what this body had decided approximately a week ago, and that is to reopen and provide all services as normal, but, and here's the caveat, but utilizing social distancing and other precautionary measures as appropriate. So with that in mind, other cautionary activities as appropriate, what does that mean in terms of your staff and in terms of the facility? Do you have enough space for the staff? Do you have to somehow provide additional space for staff because of 6-foot distancing that's recommended? Do you have, I mean, are there other things like, I understand that in certain instances, maybe water fountains are closed. I mean, are there things that you look at that maybe provide additional expenses that obviously that it's not going to change your numbers, but I think it's important for the body to fully understand how much effort is needed to put into this. And then I think the flip side of that, obviously, this year is not going to be a banner year for pool use. Even if I don't think if we put a cap on it, we just said, we're opening the doors wide for anybody, there's still going to be a lot of reluctance by a lot of people in the community to come down. So it's not going to be a banner year for business. You've projected that. What are we looking at if, again, and this is the second half of the discussion, if we were to say, let's pull the plug on the season, let's call it a wash. I realize that there may be some that are interested in using the pool. I apologize for the short notice on that. But is there a possibility that we could begin the project that's slated potentially for next year, and rather than having a not so great year this year and a no year next year, maybe speed things up and have a no year this year, but a banner year next year, opening doors to an incredibly beautiful brand new facility? If I understand from a little bit of what was discussed at the previous council meeting, there is potential economic benefit to the project itself. And I guess that's the second half of this discussion. So if you can touch just a little bit more on additional work necessary for current, and then if you could touch on potential benefit of starting the project early, that would be great. Thank you.
All right, you covered a lot, so I hope I can get everything that you said. As for, I'll start with Hefko operations. What do we have to do to accommodate whatever guidelines that are out there or whatever processes need to be in place? We have to limit our capacity to 25%. That's being recommended for all aquatic facilities. So we have to be able to monitor the people coming in and out of the facility. Right now, we have 2 essential entrances, the men's and women's locker rooms on both sides, so we have to be able to monitor that. The cashier, the individual attendant, takes the cash and processes those individuals coming in and out. So obviously, they're busy, so we have to hire additional staffing to kind of monitor capacity. We also have to be able to clean both men's and women's restrooms and locker rooms on a routine basis. Routine is not defined. You can define it however you want. Obviously, a higher capacity is more routine, less capacity is a lower routine. But we need to have a male and female person available to clean both of those back and forth as see fit. They also are mandating that you have an attendant or an individual watch over the wading pool. And our wading pool is separate than our other body of water. I'm not sure why they don't explain any of this stuff, but we have to have an attendant watch over that. So those are 3 positions that are new that we wouldn't normally ever have to have in place. So those are the basic ones. I think you talked about staff. There's no sharing of equipment, so we have to issue a rescue tube for every single employee, as well as we have to have separate bag valve masks and fanny packs. And where their break room is pretty small. I don't know the exact size, 10 by 10, Kelly, or something like that. So obviously you can maybe put 2 people in there, but we have close to probably 8, 9, maybe 10 people on staff at a time. So they can't take their breaks or be in that confined space and follow any type of social distancing guidelines. So we'll probably have to come up with another way, whether that's to buy another tent or something else and put it on a deck to at least give them space to get out of the sun and relax or eat their food. Then you look at where we're going to have these individuals work to maintain or monitor capacity. We'll have to figure out whether that's outside the facility or inside. But you can't really do inside because you don't know who's coming and going. You should stop them before they actually purchase a ticket to get in. You don't want to wait till they buy a ticket, wait till they're inside the pool and say, oh, by the way, go out now, we're at capacity. So we have to reduce our capacity. Then there's also the X factors. We don't know what the future will have for us related to COVID. Right now, I think we're doing rather well, really good for our community's sake. We don't have really anything shut down, but there is a chance that the state or county health department shuts everything down, or at least shuts down certain facilities. So pools are not opening across the state because of that risk. You're operating at a 25 capacity. You know you're not going to get the numbers you typically did. So that subsidy back to the offset those expenses is pretty high. So I kind of hopefully that answers a little bit of what we're dealing with. Plus we have to figure out, their drinking fountains we found out that all park facilities have to be shut down, and you have to provide drinking water for your patrons. So bottled water. That's kind of extremes that we have to accommodate for these type of guidelines. And then all the other guidelines that hand washing, sneezing, coughing, if you're sick, feel home, all those are pretty evident, but these are kind of unique to an aquatic facility.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Justin, am I reading, I think I'm reading this correctly, but under the 2020 budget, our expenses would be 112,000 normally, and our revenue would be 35,000. Mm-hmm. So we would lose 77,000 normally on Hefko Pool.
Yep.
And what you're saying is if we open it and operate it, well, those assumptions, that 112,000 is based on a full season, which we're not going to have, right?
At occupancy of 80%. So operations at 80%. So it's
80% of a normal season.
80% of a...
Yeah, but the season's shortened now, so 80% of that, so it's somewhere around, what's that, 56 days, 57 days, something like that? Isn't that?
Yeah, it's about 60 days.
Okay. So the loss may not be quite as big as you were showing, because we're not going to be operating it for that period of time. And you're not going to have the full staff. Like your expense, 112,000 includes full staffing for the 80% of the regular season, right?
Correct, that's correct.
So you wouldn't lose as much. So your loss may not be 102,000. It may be more because you're adding some expenses. But, and that's another thing. I think you explained pretty well what those other expenses might be, mm-hmm. to meet the separation requirements and so on. But you can't, the way you've got the numbers here, I think you're making it look much worse than it actually is.
Well, I'm not trying to make this could be the worst case. It could be better. I mean, we could not get the revenue or the attendance that we projecting at 50%. We could get more expenses. This is kind of the worst case scenario. I could make it a best case scenario, then you'd be pretty frustrated at me not giving kind of the worst case scenario. So it's a,
Ranges are nice.
right. Well, a good bit of range. You could range it from 77 to 102, I guess.
Mr. Bedke.
Yeah, I don't think it makes sense to open the pool based on what was presented to us. You do have budgeted $112,000 for the pool expenses this year.
Right.
Without getting into it, because I want the fundraising to go on, but I've got a place for that to go.
Okay.
Go ahead and continue. Oh, sorry. Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. Comment was made that the staffing time may be less because the season is shorter, but are you also having to provide additional training, thus causing the staffing to remain more close to a normal season? Or is that not the case?
Yes, there'll be additional staffing just by the 3 additional people we have to hire. But it's a variable number because if it's hot summer, we're going to have more staffing. If it's a cold summer, it's lower. So the 2020 is a budget. It'd be nice if these are fixed numbers and they're very tangible and easy to measure, but they do vary based off of just air temperature. But now it's a varying of air temperature and COVID, so you don't know exactly what you're going, I don't know what we're going to be dealing with. It could be super hot and no one's there, or it could be a normal season, but how do you know when we don't know?
You commented a week ago that there would be additional training necessary for the staff that work.
Oh, for sure.
So for that perspective, I'm thinking, if you hire on June 1 and you open on June 5, you had minimal training, everything's good to go. Now you hire on June 5 or June 1 or whatever it is, but you're not opening right away, but you've also got additional time when that staff's still going to be working because they're having to do the additional training. So the decline number of days of staffing is not necessarily as great as the decline number of days of pool being open.
Right, we'll have to have obviously additional training just because we're dealing with a pandemic that we've never had to train for. And to be honest, a lot of us will have to figure out what to do with that training. We'll see what best practices are, see what other municipal pools are doing, what are they putting in place, and then what makes sense for us. As being unknown, this is the best guess that we can have.
So Justin, just to finish that up, basically the essence of the whole thing is there's right now, it looks like a $69,500 range. Could go either way, or maybe 5 or 10,000 less, but that is the range that you have, and you've already done all the work to see all these variables, correct?
Correct.
Okay, please finish your presentation.
All right, so the Marshfield Outdoor Aquatic Center, I think this is about talking about the actual construction of a new pool, the timeliness and where we are, and the fundraising. So everyone knows we got a large donor. I want to take this opportunity to thank that donor. Hopefully very soon we can make that name public. I want to take this opportunity to thank them and their family for giving a huge donation towards this project in such an uncertain time. That brought our current number to 2.5 million. Our goal is 3 million, so we're about $500,000 short on the private end of it. So that's really, really good news. Now, I have been in communication with our design team, which is Bozen, Iconica, and Architecture. They are saying that we have favorable bidding climate, and that means contractors are hungry. What was predicted as a really busy summer and busy construction season has taken a downturn because of the pandemic. So contractors are looking for work either late this fall or late this summer or fall. They're looking for work. So times are good for bidding. Weather are favorable conditions. If you ever build anything in the winter, at least up here, it's more costly. You can't really fathomably say it's less costly to really do anything in winter except for plow snow. So obviously there's a savings to be had by getting an early start. The most favorable weather conditions are obviously if we can start in May and finish late fall, but we're not at that point. Our schedule is determined by either this body or fundraising. So those two components are kind of up in the air, especially when you have private fundraising as a component. But we do have favorable weather conditions by starting earlier. They predict 1.5 to 2% of an overall project cost. So that's $90,000 to $150,000 range. Favorable bidding is 1 to 2%, which is $60,000 to $120,000 range. Those are ranges that they best guess, but obviously those are a lot of variables. I say that now, and it could rain the rest of the year and everything gets flooded out. I don't know. That's just what's predicted. And we would have a favorable schedule where if we started earlier, we could open earlier next year. The longer that is waited, obviously the later it goes into next year. So those are just some favorable conditions and cost implications for the project itself.
Mrs. Spiros.
Okay, for me, this comes down to, we talked a lot about a lot of things, training staff, COVID, washing bathrooms, all this kind of stuff. I mean, everybody's doing that, so I don't get overwhelmed with those concepts or those ideas. But for me, what this comes down to is a very shortened season and expenses. I just don't think that the city necessarily needs to take on. It makes me sad because I'd like to see the pool be open because I think people are going to use it if it's open. However, with that said, the idea of being able to get an RFP done quicker, to get our bids quicker, to get a lower rate, I think economically outweighs the benefit of keeping the pool open for 60 days max this year. With that said, I would be in favor of the pool. Unfortunately, not opening this year. Another thing I wanted to point out is that we can't possibly foresee if there's additional cost, that you go to open that pool, you could have a major leak, and then we have to pay for that. And I want people to remember that this pool's 81 years old as I say that. So for me, the benefit of keeping it open as opposed to trying to get our RFP done, our bids out quicker, and saving a considerable amount of money in construction, it just doesn't match up. For that reason, I would be in favor of keeping Hefko Pool closed this year, continuing fundraising because we are still, $500,000 short. And I guess we can't really start construction and go up to RFP until we know for sure we've got the money, but I have full confidence that that's going to come in. So again, with that said, I would be in favor of keeping Hefko Pool closed this year and hopefully using the savings that we see and putting that to good use for a new aquatic center in 2021.
Thank you. Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. We are a little shy on the goal, the fundraising. Is there a possibility that if we were to go out for RFP, find favorable bids, and decide to continue with or to move forward with construction, that maybe some items could be skipped for the time being to save that missing money, and then as owners come forward to maybe place those items. I'm not talking about let's not do one of the vessels, but I'm talking about additional items that maybe are going to be nice finishing touches, nice amenities, but that aren't necessarily vital for the basic footprint of that pool.
Yeah, to your question, we can remove, I'll call finishes or final touches that could be altered, whether that's certain paint on solid block wall or things of that nature. There's also the option of just progressing as fast as your fundraising is progressing. So meaning we could do demo and earthwork and get jumped on that because there's enough money for that, but to continue the fundraising phase, but you can't start these next phases. So rather than approving the entire project in its whole, as you take it off to more like sections, and I don't have to defer to the design team like Bozen on what sections make sense because I don't really know how you stage construction for a pool. I know how it will look like when it's done, but I don't know this proper stagings on what makes sense to say, okay, if we're to do base it off quarters, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, how would you cut that out? So you could do that. As for amenity, there are some amenities that are not sponsored or have sponsorship yet. And that would be, I think, like the climbing wall, there's deck chairs, even the concession stand, we could either not buy the refrigerating units or stuff like that. But those are options to consider that might be on the table where when you have a person who sponsored a slide, you probably should put that slide up. But if you don't have a person that sponsored a large shade structure at 10,000, well, you could hold off in putting that in later. Some components like plumbing and electrical, you need to do that no matter what. So you're not saving any money. But there are a number of amenities that you could choose to table or delay that may save some monies, but you could also do it in stages. So there's a few ways to skin the cat, but you could ask the Boson to come back with those strategies, and we could, I guess, explore that option.
Okay, I just have a quick follow-up. First of all, I won't mention to my wife, who's in veterinary medicine, your little skin the
No,
cat
we
comment.
won't, bad analogy.
But, you know, I'm really optimistic. We live in an incredible community that has been incredibly and continues to be incredibly generous. Looking at some of the major projects that have occurred, anything from the library to the athletic complex at the high school to now what's coming forward with this, I want to thank the community and those that have given. It's incredible that we have a community that's this giving. I also am very, very suspicious that when shovel hits ground, the rest is going to come, because I think that's going to be they are serious. There is no backing down. They're moving forward. Let's get this done. So the idea that we can potentially go out for RFP, that we can potentially get the ball rolling with the monies that we have, and then we can kind of finish things off as the rest of the monies come in, I think that that's extremely appealing to me. And with all of that said in the comments that are here, I guess I would make a motion to not open the pool this season, instead to go out to RFP and to start the process of getting the new aquatic center completed.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Budke has a second. Any discussion? Mr. Rosendich.
No, I was just seconding it.
Okay.
I was just seconding the motion.
Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't go along with this, and the only reason I can't go along with it is we lived through the City Hall one-for-one exchange back some time ago, and the city ended up taking about a $1.5 million bath on that one. Basically, I don't think it's wise to begin the construction on it until we've got the money in the bank. What was the old movie, Show Me the Money? Was that what it said? Basically, that's how I feel about this. I feel it's irresponsible for us to start into this thing, because what might end up, I love Mr. Wetzel's optimism. He's absolutely wonderful. I love working with him. The optimism, however, is in the sweet by and by and not in the nasty here and now. And this virus has had a horrible impact on our business community. A lot of people are out of work. A lot of people are drawing on unemployment. And I don't know that the fundraising is going to be there. I don't know that it is. I think the responsible thing for us to do is wait until the other $500,000 is in the bank, so that the city is not on the hook for it. We're going to be on the hook for some anyway, because if I recall, the fundraising plan was that people who wanted to make major donations, say $250,000, would pay $50,000 a year over the period of time. So the city is actually fronting that money actually now. So the $3 million that we're borrowing isn't going to cover everything. We're going to be covering it out of other sources. And I'm not quite sure how we did it for City Hall, but that's exactly the kind, and the library too. We did the same thing for the library. So I think it's financially irresponsible to plunge into this thing now. And I'm sorry, but I can't support it at this point. I would urge my colleagues not to support it also. Thank you.
Which is certainly fine to do, but just understand we're talking about here, even not taking out the high things, it's over $250,000 savings by going now. So if we wait until we have everything, and we do have, being on the fundraising committee, there's a lot of people that are very, very close. I mean, just think of this: if we wait and we don't get it, and then we don't get the favorable bids, and we don't get the early weather thing, then we get the other 500,000, but we lost the 250. Mathematically, that doesn't make any sense. Mr. Budke.
Mr. Witzel, correct me, your motion that I second, I didn't think you said that we were going to go ahead full bore on this thing. I thought I heard you say that we will look for, as Justin said, if we don't get the money, we will look for things that could be done later and see what that comes out to be.
My motion was to not open the pool first,
right,
and to go out for RFP second. So we're still not signing on the dotted line.
Right.
We're looking for RFP. We're looking for, what are the actualized savings? What are the bids coming in at? That's, I think, it's the first step. I mean, at some point, we're going to have to figure out the funding. At some point, we're going to have to take action to borrow money. I mean, there's going to be something that has to happen, but I think we need to at least get the ball rolling with the RFP to see what are we looking at? Are we looking at the numbers that are projected at $250,000 savings? What are we looking at? In the meantime, as was mentioned by Ms. Spiros, it doesn't make a lot of sense to jump in and open a pool for a shortened season with additional work and expense. So, you know, that's why they go in twofold.
Thank you.
Mr. Fire.
I've been involved with a couple of these fundraisers and a couple of these projects through the years. More than I want, I guess, but I do know some people that have already donated to this project, and they're wondering when we're going to put a shovel to the project. And I think that the people that they have parties with and have supper with are probably potential donors that as soon as we get moving, they'll talk to their friends and they'll tell them, well, I've already donated X number of dollars. I think you'll get it once you start. But there's an element out there that hasn't given to any of these other projects, and this is one that most of the people that are my age or older have already used this 80-year-old pool. We swam in it and got kicked out of it and got all sorts of trouble at the Hefko Pool.
Nick.
Thank you. I believe the agreement we made was that we would match up to $3 million, which means to me that at this point, we can build a $5 million pool with the money that's already available. Hopefully we get more money, but if we don't, we've got a $5 million pool instead of a $6 million.
Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am going to support this, and two reasons. One, I think it's being fiscally responsible to close the pool down, so I appreciate Parks and Recreation staff, Justin, for coming forward and doing that. Also, second, and I agree with what Alderman Witzel, Alderwoman Spiros have both said, is we are just going upward. Let's see what the RFPs bring back, and then we will decide on the time, so I will be supporting. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing no, Mr. Bark.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to respond to the comments that Councilmember Wagner made, which were good, I think, in terms of the timing of funds coming in and how the final dollar amount plays out. We realized that what we need to do as the project goes along is we've got to be able to have enough funds to cover the contractor bills. And so really it's incumbent upon Justin to work closely with Ron Allman. I wish Ron was on this call, but we've done this in past projects with the library and community center and other improvements where we've been able to time it out that even as the pledges are coming in, we're able to make sure those contractor bills are paid. At the end, I think the city did actually carry the balance for a little bit while those final pledges came in. That is obviously when you're talking about pledges going out 3 to 5 years, that's going to happen. I will say one thing though, in the library and community center, when we got done with it, we had less than $20,000 of bad debts, if you want to call it that, pledges that were not fulfilled. And on a $4.2 million amount raised privately, that was less than 1/2 of 1%. So what was told to us by the consultant that I kind of wondered at first how the bad debts could be so low, there really were very few people who didn't ultimately fulfill their pledges.
All right, seeing no, oh, there we go. Mr. Handler.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Becky Spiros. I think we have an opportunity here, and if we keep the pool shut and go ahead and get our RFPs and get good bids, I think everything else will follow. Because if we do anything to slow down this process, I think we'll slow down donors too. So I think we ought to go ahead with it.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, then roll call vote, please.
Fire,
Yes.
Hazel,
Yes.
Rosendish,
Yes.
Bargander,
Yes.
Wagner,
No.
Witzel,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Spiro,
Yes.
Butke,
Yes.
and Handler.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Item E, review council's May 26th decision regarding opening the 2nd Street Community Center presented by Mike Fire.
Does everybody have a copy of this in front of you?
But
Tom may not have. I have a senior programs for the, during the COVID. I want to, before I get any further along, I want to correct some spelling. I don't want anybody jumping on me about this. Apparently our typewriter doesn't know how to spell cards. It says cars instead of cards. Typewriter. See? I knew somebody would pick that up. So what we sat down and looked through these, this is what we do at the senior center. We do blood pressure. Blood pressure is an automatic no, because we're not going to do that for two reasons. You're touching the arm, and we don't think we can find a volunteer that will do the blood pressure. We were using one of the, who we're using? Three Oaks, and they're not going to come up and do it. The other ones that we could possibly get it would be the fire department, and I don't think they're going to be interested. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of the next ones are all card games. And, you know, it says, can they social distance? Yes, we set it up that there's before at the table. All we'd have is a max of 16 in the room at any given time. That's the only way we can do that is where they stay 6 foot apart. The only problem we have with cards, and we haven't got anybody to tell us if this can be passed on with a deck of cards, if that's going to have any effect on, because there's always a dealer and there's always going to be, everybody's going to be handling the cards. You reshuffle, you're going to have the same thing. So every time we go to a game, we're going to have to change the deck. That's possible. To have a new deck with each deal. We can't seem to get a handle on if we need to have a new deck of cards or not. Bridge, we're down to bridge. It's 4 at the table. We don't know if they'll play. We don't know if it's going to be done or not. They usually do it on a long length of a table, and you can't put 2 tables together because then they can't deal across. Crafts, that's a yes because they're on their own. There'll be no physical contact. Pool, we can limit it to 8 in the room so that, and then they had pool today, and I think they tell me that there was 10 people there, and when they started playing regular pool, there was only 8 people in the room, 4 to a team, so that worked out fine. General yoga, they use a chair. There's no physical contact. Exercise, it can be done. There's no physical contact. Tai Chi, the same thing. Square dancing, number is 8 in the square. Physical contact, yes. We don't really think that we'd want to do that. If any of us ever square dance, you get real close and get moseyed on and whatever. So I don't think we'll do that either. Karaoke, we'll do, it can be done. Only thing is, they're probably going to have to wear a mask. On the bottom, so we're not requiring but recommending masks. So this is what we'd like to present, and we'd like to have the center open up with these guidelines, and all we have to tell people is when they want to play cards, 4 at a table, 16 in a room. That's all we're asking. If we're going to be open, we'd like to see these guidelines. And also, we don't have the attorney here, so I was going to ask Wolfgram is. He's here. Is he?
Don.
Oh, he's not. Okay. Is there any liability if we would have say we have a table of 4, and they would come and play cards, and 10 days later, all 4 of them come down with the COVID-19. Are we liable anyway on that at all?
That sounds like a trick question.
No,
so, you know, I have said in the past, I think that it's pretty tough to anticipate with COVID, you'd end up with liability because you'd have a hard time trying to trace it back to specifically where that happened. Could it happen? Yes, because we do this contact tracing. But, you know, trying to figure that out in the scheme of all the other things that the city is doing. We've opened up parks. You're talking about opening pools. You're talking about opening up other events. And, you know, it would take a unique type of case. I don't want to go into that. I have discussed with some council members, you know, the possibility of litigation for making certain decisions. But for the most part, when you guys are making policy decisions, you're protected from liability that way. So when you ask about the liability, I think it's remote to be able to say that somebody got that right there at the table and didn't come to the table with it.
All right, so with that, then, Mr. Fire, are you,
I would like to make a motion that we present these guidelines and post them at the center.
there's a motion, is there a second? Mr. Hendler is a second. Any discussion? Mr. Witzel?
So you're not asking us to shut the place down?
No.
You're just asking us to establish specific guidelines, when before it was just more
It
of
was
a,
wide open.
yeah, and more of a do what you want, but try to practice something. You're trying to put it in.
We'll try to keep everybody, the four people on each table in that room, that's all the tables they're gonna have, so no chairs. So that's all they're gonna be able, they'll have to play that way.
And if a person's into five-handed shit,
Well, if now they're gonna play, they have to play 400 sheephead.
oh,
Or they can play five,
three-handed.
if one gets up to go somewhere, somebody takes his place. That came up too.
All right, any further discussion? Mrs. Spiros?
Mike, did you do this? Did you put this together?
No, I had some help.
Oh, well, I just want to congratulate y'all because I think this is really an effective.
Say you did.
I think it's really effective and well
credit.
thought out. It allows for the center to be open and for people to still come together and have some activities. It all makes perfectly good sense to me, and I just want to thank you for the time that you put into this.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Fire,
Yes.
Facial,
Yes.
Rosendish,
Yes.
Bargander,
Yes.
Wagner, Witzel,
yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Spiro,
Yes.
Butke,
Yes.
and Hendler.
Yes.
Thank you, that motion carries. Item F, consider whether the City of Marshfield will host this year's July 4th fireworks display presented by Justin Casperson, Parks and Rec Director.
So, if any of you read the newspaper or the online article this weekend about whether or not we were going to light off fireworks, this was more about how are the ancillary activities associated with those fireworks going to be handled. This is a city function, responsibility of the city. Parks and Recreation plays a role, as well as police and fire and support services. We were open off the area, but it wasn't clear on exactly how we should handle this. This is kind of an X factor. The display or the fireworks display itself is not really in question. It's those ancillary activities. And those, in a normal year, we have obviously the fireworks display. We have vehicles parked throughout the fairgrounds property, watching from their vehicles or outside their vehicles. We have crowds gather in and around those grandstands, and there's usually food vendors, a DJ, bounce houses, individuals mingle about. The restrooms that are attached to the fairground offices are open and operating. We have staff there to kind of open things up, monitor things, address, unfortunately, like clogged toilets and things that we don't want to talk about here, but our staff does address. Realistically, we can't enforce or adhere to social distancing guidelines by allowing people into the grandstands and somehow putting markers or placemats or however you're going to enforce that. I'm fearful of the vendors selling food products and beverages there, as well as DJ and bounce house. I'm not sure how a bounce house could be administered trying to follow social distancing guidelines. So it is my recommendation that we still have the fireworks display. We still allow individuals to park their vehicles in their normal parking areas, but we don't allow the individuals to gather in and around the grandstands, which would be in the grandstands. The public restrooms should be closed because we can't sanitize them in the method that's required by CDC guidelines, as well as we don't allow food stands to operate or bounce houses and ask the DJ not to come. I always enjoy the fireworks. I always like to be a part of it. My entire career, every park and rec department I've ever been involved with, we've always had the pleasure of running the fireworks, good, bad, or otherwise. So it's kind of upsetting that we have to change what we normally do or making a recommendation we change, but there's no way of really following these guidelines appropriately, but still wanting to acknowledge the fact that we want a fireworks display.
Thank you. Mr. Butke, you have a motion?
Motion to.
Motion to approve as presented. Is there a second? Mr. Rosendich, there's a second. Any discussion? Mr. Witzel.
It's Festival that sponsors the fireworks.
Yeah, they're the only financial supporter or sponsor of the fireworks.
Okay, and they're fine with this as well because
They still want to support, they do it not only here, but throughout Wisconsin and probably their whole region. So they still are paying for all the fireworks if their communities are still having them.
okay, and I guess knowing this city, and we're pretty flat here, other than a few trees that get in the way, I know that there are a lot of people that do enjoy the fireworks even when they don't go down to the fairgrounds to enjoy these other additional amenities. So I think this is a fine idea. It's not ideal. We'd love to have the gatherings. We would have loved to have Dairy Fest this last weekend, but in the current age, I think that this is a good compromise. I like this idea.
So are you hosting again then this year?
All right, any further discussion? Mr. Bargender.
Question for Justin, just for clarification, you had mentioned that the restrooms would be closed on the grounds?
Well, there'd be no people on the grounds if there's no DJ or anything of that nature.
I mean, people are still there. Some people come hours in advance to get a good viewing spot. They're having refreshments. It could be 90 degrees that day, okay? They may spend a considerable amount of time with themselves and their children. And we're saying that there's going to be no restroom facilities to be had. As the night wears on, the cars are parked tight. Sometimes you're parked in. Where are you going to take your children if they need to use a restroom? That's my biggest problem with going forward with fireworks without a restroom. I've gone to the fireworks my entire life, 55, 6 years. And I know how it works down there. When it gets dark, it gets a little chaotic down there. Hard to see, not a lot of lighting and stuff. And I just cannot see not having restrooms available to the public during that event. Thank you.
Any further, just Mrs. Spiros?
Yeah, I see that same problem. I don't really have an opposition with most of the other things, but the bathroom issue I do have, because you're right, it's a lot of little kids. I don't know, you've got a 2 or 3 year old that you just potty train. They're not going to hold it. They're going to pee their pants or whatever. But I think it's really important to remember that we aren't responsible for enforcing social distancing, because you've used that terminology a couple different times. We're not responsible for people's actions. Certainly, we want to encourage social distancing. Certainly, we want to encourage, all of the things that they need to do to keep themselves safe. But we're not responsible, to make sure that they are following social distancing. It's not a law. Okay, so I think that that the bathrooms are critical and crucial. I think that we could probably have somebody watching those, manning those, what have you. You can suit it up with some Lysol, some disinfectant wipes. And people need to understand that if they're going to use the bathroom, that they need to protect themselves. And whether it's, wipe the toilet down themselves, wash their hands, what have you. But I don't see us having no bathrooms there either.
Justin?
I think as an option, knowing that the crowds won't be in and around those grandstands, as we explore the idea of putting porta-johns where the majority of those vehicles are going to be located. And maybe that's throughout the park, not necessarily in one location, because that should spread out groups, and then we somehow put them under, I'll call them lights, because then it'll be easier to identify and work with the porta-john or porta-toilets companies on what they see as normal. And we do outfit it, because I agree with everyone that restrooms are a tough one not to have, especially with young children, because as much as you'd like them to not have to go to the bathroom, they typically find the most inopportune time to use that bathroom.
All right, is that enough, Mr. Bargender?
I'd like to amend that motion to include the restrooms being open during the fireworks display.
Is there a second to that motion to amend by Mr. Fisher? Any discussion? Mr. Witzel?
That amendment, does that mean that you want the actual restrooms by the fair office opened, or do you want them to take care of porta-johns?
I'd absolutely want the restrooms so they have flushing capacity, they have hand washing capacity there. They're lighted. So the restrooms, whatever restrooms deem appropriate that we normally have open, we'd have open again for this year's fireworks.
And Justin, how many bathroom facilities would normally be open? Because what I'm fearful of is we suddenly have 200, 500 people that are parked, and they're all gathering on the restroom waiting for their turn, and now all of a sudden we're encouraging this crowding of people.
There's one restroom, the fairgrounds office restrooms, which can handle a large crowd. It's designed for that way. I don't know the number of toilets and urinals in there, but it could handle large crowds. It's the question of sanitation, and I think we will do our best, and we'll put signage up saying that, you know,
Use at your own risk.
well, for the most part, it should be common sense, right? I mean, everything should be at your own risk now. I mean,
Sounds like overseas.
I mean, that's, whether you go to a restaurant or to the bathroom at the fairground, at the fireworks, it's at your own risk. And sometimes you have to risk it because your 5-year-old needs to go to the bathroom really bad, and you don't want to leave.
Justin, if the fairgrounds are closed though, if we're not gonna have it in there, we had the porta potties out in front. I don't know that many people are gonna walk all the way back when they've got those porta potties right out front. Wouldn't you have them out front since the,
We could do that in alternate, instead of opening those restrooms, but
and
Mr.
they
Bargander's.
have wash basins as well. The only thing I'm just thinking is if, I don't know how many people are gonna wanna walk into something that's empty. I mean, we could do both too. I mean, that's,
Whatever,
It's fine.
whatever you guys tell me.
They're gonna be allowed to park, they're gonna be allowed to park in the grassy, they're gonna be allowed to park where the rides are, right, for the fair, just like they always do? They're gonna fill that baby up.
People park all over, yes.
They'll park all over. The only spot they can't get in is the grandstand and.
Or the track, we have a
Or the
roped off
track,
area.
so is there a second to Mr. Bargender's? Fisher did. Okay, good. Any further discussion? All right, seeing no further discussion, let's please vote a roll call vote.
Fire,
Yes.
Paschal,
Yes.
Rosendish,
Yes.
Bargander,
Yes.
Wagner. Yes. Witzel,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Spiros,
Yes.
Butke,
Yes.
and Hendler.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. And the last one for the evening is to discuss the
That was
We have to
the
vote
amendment.
on.
Oh, my bad. Let's go to the original motion and a second to approve Justin's plan. There was a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Fire,
Yes.
Paschal,
Yes.
Rosendish,
Yes.
Bargander,
Yes.
Wagner. Witzel,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Spiros,
Yes.
Butke,
Yes.
Hendler.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. And the final one, discuss expectations for in-person attendance at future council committee meetings. And this is literally at the discretion of what you all want to do. There's 8 of you here tonight. We can certainly leave it as is to be virtual if we want. I think if I've enjoyed playing these back at home and seeing 25 different people, and you really never know who's talking or whatever. And I believe that if we did bring it in here, we could bring it in such a way that people are socially distanced. We could put up dividers if need be. I just think it would give it, with all the topics that we have going on. You have to admit, when we first started this, I think there was myself, Mr. Fisher, and Mr. Witzel, and then slowly more people came, which was fine. And there's a difference in the meeting, but also I think for the public trying to view this, when you're trying to view 25 different people. Now, of course, if for people that are, if there's medical issues, then we've got to make sure that they're safe, and people can be here, and we can make special places so that they are safe and feel safe. So I'm opening that up to the body. It's your call, and if you'd like to do it or not. Mr. Hendler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's time to get back to the business at hand by being in person. I know that I've spoken against that in the past, but I've spoken with my physician, and he wished me well. So I'm in favor of it.
Well played, Mr. Hendler. Mr. Butke.
Yeah, Mayor, I just have to have to comment on this. If you're watching this in your spare time, you gotta find some hobbies.
It's very true. Any further discussion or Mr. Bargender?
Yeah, I believe it's time to get back to business here in person. It is difficult to watch these on all these little screens and stuff. And I think the mayor mentioned this a long time ago. We miss the physical nods and waves and that sort of thing that we kind of rely on. We watch the rest of the council and we get a feel for what they're kind of thinking, the body language, I guess that's what the mayor mentioned earlier and a couple months ago. So, and I think this room is big enough to do social distancing with a full council. We usually do not get a lot of people coming to the meetings anymore since we went online. But yeah, I totally agree. I think we set up some type of timeline and let's get everyone down here again. And thank you.
And I think, Steve, when you set up the, which I know you always do, when you set up the agendas for city staff, I mean, they might not want to be in here the whole time, but they could just, if they've got 2 or 3 things going, then get them done so that they don't have to stay because, of course, we want to be sensitive to city staff for that as well. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in support of this, but I would just like to say that I think we should be mindful of public comments, and not all citizens are going to feel comfortable coming into the council chamber. And so I do think we should, as we have been doing, give the public multiple avenues to make their public comments. So if they could continue to email their public comments to the city, or if we could still have a way to call in. I don't know if that's possible, but if we could just have more ways for the public to comment so that if they do not feel comfortable coming into the chambers, they have that.
Mr. Budke.
Yeah, I'd like to see everybody here, but the other side of it, if anybody doesn't feel comfortable, I think they should still have that option, and including staff and so on and so forth. I think it's okay to come, as everybody else has said. We got the social distancing, but I really feel if somebody's really got a problem with it, they should be able to do that.
Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. I believe there's actually 2 parts to this, 3 parts, but you kind of addressed one of them. We have this body of 10 elected officials plus the mayor. We have the staff who would be coming in, and I think that was addressed with the idea of kind of lumping things together as best we can and then letting them come in, give their piece and be done. But then there's also the other committees, and there's a lot of committees that normally meet in potentially smaller venues with larger groups. And so I guess that's another thing to discuss. What about EDB? What about Park Rec and Forestry? What about all these other committees? Do we want to encourage them to meet in person as well, or are we, giving them the option to continue to meet remotely? That's the other part of this.
I believe that we would, and I'll get you in just a second, Mrs. President. I believe that we would, if they want to have that opportunity, they can. But as you know, we've been listening to something that's very distracting this whole meeting, and we don't know what it is. So it's really disruptive. And for people watching this, not only are they, for lack of a better term, if any of you remember Hollywood Squares or the Brady Bunch, this is kind of where we're at. And then when you've got that background, I just believe it's too much for them. But we would still respect if anybody is not feeling safe or whatever, we would do whatever I believe we had. And we'd have to, as Mr. Fisher said, make sure that everybody knows there's other ways to do the public comments. And out of respect to city staff, if they don't feel comfortable staying, they wouldn't necessarily need to. Mrs. Spiros.
Yeah, I think that we need to continue both options at this point in time because nobody here knows other people's circumstances. I mean, you may all feel healthy and you may all feel well, but you don't know what other people have in their homes. Some people live with immunocompromised members of their families. Some people on this common council take care of the most severely immunocompromised patients. So I think that we can't, and especially when we bring in the idea of committees also, that's a lot of people you're talking that are attending meetings. And I just think that it's not our place to make that decision for them. There are still a lot of people who are uncomfortable. There's a lot of people who are just caution to the wind and they're done and they're coming out and they feel fine about everything, and that's great. But just bear in mind that you don't really know what goes on behind other people's closed doors, and you don't know their situations. And I'm especially sensitive to this because, I had a sister, of course, who was severely immunocompromised, and it was an infection that took her life. So you have to bear that in mind when you're making these decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Mayor. I think with the exception of today's and Sunday's numbers, I think the numbers of cases have been going up in Wisconsin. The point I want to make is that if this thing ever, God forbid, gets into our community as badly as it has in so many other communities, we still have options to shut this down if we need to do though. We certainly have the ability of the mayor to call an emergency or do another emergency declaration and basically shut things down around town as well as in here. So we have that option. And again, the point, Becky, I appreciate your point about people with conditions that would make them more vulnerable. They can make the decision to stay out of here if they need to. And I think that's great. So I'll go along with this one with the caveat that we got to keep our eyes open.
Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments that are being said, and I appreciate the potential flexibility for the individuals that don't feel comfortable. I guess from a technology perspective, I'm kind of wondering, is there another option instead of the Hollywood Squares where, there's 8 of us in here right now, 8 of us in here, 9 of us in here right now that are on 9 screens here. Is there a way to, instead of having 9 individual squares, have one feed from this room and only have additional squares, if you will, or additional video feeds from those that are remote? So I don't know, again, and that's probably a pretty good, and you don't have to answer now, but it's a pretty good challenge for you to come up with how do we make it happen if we are indeed going to try to move as many here as possible, but still leave that potential occasional individual out.
I guess if it's okay if I can comment on this, there is a speaker view that one can change so that it shows whoever is speaking. If we were to use fully Zoom for the meeting, without using the full Zoom meeting, it does not detect. But again, if you have such a close proximity to each other, it may have a hard time detecting who is actually speaking. So the challenge is when you have a room full of people, and the other side of the coin is this too. Maybe some audience like to see everybody's body language or whatever. So I have a hard time deciding, should I put all the little square screen up or should I just pick whoever's speaking, but then you're hiding the other people's, body language and so on. So that's the kind of balancing act that I'm in a sense that if I do it one way, I'm going to have an issue. If I do it the other way, I will have another issue. Plus the complexity of having someone essentially sit here and try to control who is the full screen mode. So that's my challenge.
And so you have the ability then to make a motion or just keep it as it is. It's completely your discretion. All right. Steve.
Yeah, I was just going to comment. I think there's been very good discussion here. I think that where it's going is really positive. I think that over time we've been moving toward more representation in the council chambers. You have 8 members there tonight. I'm speaking to you from my basement, I admit, but I know we've had Dan and Tom and Justin were all at the Board of Public Works meeting. Justin's there tonight. I'll likely be in person for most of the meetings. I agree with what Ken Bargander said. It is better to be able to see some of the facial expressions and be able to be connecting in person. And yet I also agree with what Rebecca said. She made a really good point. There's always going to be people who, for various reasons, are uncomfortable. There's a variety of views among staff. Some are more comfortable than others at this point in terms of stepping into those environments. Some aren't all that comfortable. So I think leaving some latitude is a good thing in the midst of what I think is slowly moving toward being back in the same room. And I agree with what Councilmember Wagner said. We need to keep monitoring what direction this is all going.
All right, so seeing no further discussion on that, then we'll go to item H, suggested items for future meetings. Any suggested items for future meetings? Seeing none then, is there a motion to adjourn? Sure. Motion by Mr. Butke, second by Mr. Peschel. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.